introduce another great leader of the South Shore, our chairwoman of the board for the Chamber of Commerce for the year 2015. Please welcome Jacqueline Collins.
So, as Peter mentioned, Peter alluded to, and all of you know about, our regional development study project. And I'd like to take a quick moment to describe the scope of that project and how that connects to our guest speaker. So we view economic development as an extension of community development. And when you talk community development, you talk about people. You know, people who live in those communities. And in order to sustain the quality of life that we have and the prosperity that we have, it's necessary to reach out to the people in these communities and our communities who may be less fortunate than us. And this includes people perhaps that are not just new to the South Shore, but also they may be new to America, and they need our help. So keep that in mind as we talk about the regional development, that it is hearts and minds. So it's both intellectual and it's both in the heart for people that live here. Our speaker has been a lifelong champion of helping building communities by focusing attention on the less fortunate people we sometimes overlook and problems that sometimes we choose to ignore. And sometimes even the flaws in some powerful institutions that we like to deny that those flaws exist. Cardinal O'Malley is not merely the moral leader for his church, he is also a community leader in our state. His leadership and management of one of the state's largest organizations makes him one of the most influential community leaders in Massachusetts. His leadership in confronting hard issues is well known beyond our state. Last year, Pope Francis named our guest as one of 8 members of a special pontifical commission for the protection of minors. He is the only American appointed to this commission. If saying you are one of 8 on a special pontifical commission is not enough to get people's attentions, I have been told that he also tells people that he is a member of the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. In addition, I have to add something. I just found out that our guest also has a blog. So I'd like to introduce and call up His Eminence, Lord Cardinal Sean O'Malley.
Delighted to be here. I want to thank you and congratulate you for all the good work that your organization does. I was just informed that I'm a member. I hope the dues aren't too much. That's the only thing. But yesterday, this part of the world, we all celebrated St. Patrick's Day. It's always a wonderful celebration in Boston, and my favorite story from the life of St. Patrick is how when he was evangelizing in County Mayo in the west of Ireland, where the O'Malleys come from, and it's a wonderful place to visit. People go there for arthritis. You get it in about 2 weeks if you go there. But St. Patrick was preaching the gospel, and a very famous chieftain by the name of Ossian asked to be received into the faith. And so a huge crowd gathered in the field for his baptism, and St. Patrick arrived in his bishop's vestments and his mitre and his staff, and he stuck his staff in the ground and began this long exposition on the Catholic faith. And the neophyte was standing in front of him, and people noticed that this very fierce chieftain began to sweat very profusely, and he grew very pale, and all of a sudden he fainted dead away. And they rushed over to see what was the matter, and they discovered, to everyone's horror, that St. Patrick, quite inadvertently, had stuck his staff through the man's foot. And so they threw water on him, and they revived him, and they said, "Why didn't you say anything?" He said, "I thought it was part of the ceremony." Well, poor Ossian didn't know too much about Catholic liturgy, but I think he did understand that discipleship is often challenging and often about embracing the cross. I don't know how many of you were able to read the William McGurn article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. He's writing about St. Patrick's Day and says that in our celebration of St. Patrick, the saint will certainly get his due, and so will those hard-working ancestors. But he writes, for all the speechifying, what will likely go unheralded is the singular achievement of the Irish in their adopted homeland, the Catholic school system that stretches across the nation and ranges from kindergarten through college. That's a pity, he writes, because just as they did in the days of the great Irish migrations, Catholic schools in our own time hold out perhaps the best hope for the assimilation and upward advancement of a new wave of immigrants, especially from Latin America. Former Mayor Ed Koch once famously remarked that when the masses of immigrants reached our shores in the 19th century, they were greeted by two women, Lady Liberty and Mother Church. What Mayor Koch was referring to in great part were the parish schools. What the Catholic schools did for the immigrants of those days, the Catholic schools must and are doing for immigrants today. Many Protestants in those days before ecumenism, they feared that the Catholic schools would be an obstacle to assimilation, incubating an anti-American colony in the heart of the Republic. From today's vantage, we can see how misplaced their fears were. These schools lifted millions of Irish, Italians, Poles, French, Lithuanians, Germans, and other European immigrants into mainstream society. In these schools, children not only learned the skills that would propel them into the middle class, they were instilled with an appreciation of American virtues, American institutions, and American exceptionalism. I can think of no other institution that has been as successful as Catholic schools in raising people from poverty to the middle class. And we're delighted that Sacred Heart School is here today as part of our celebration. I was, of course, very edified to read Mr. McGurn's reflection on our Catholic schools and the possibilities that lie ahead. We are blessed with a wonderful Catholic school system in the Archdiocese, which is about the same size as the Boston public school system with around 50,000 students. And our school system is very successful in giving all of our children, immigrants and native-born, Catholics and non-Catholics, a wonderful education and a preparation for life. We're so grateful to those of you here present and many others whose generosity and sacrifice make our Catholic schools possible. It was, of course, our Catholic sisters that founded them and launched our Catholic school system that has trained so many millions of Americans. As Mr. McGurn quotes a sage person who says, on St. Patrick's Day we celebrate the mutual blessings that America was for the Irish and the Irish were for America. Pope Francis likes to describe our church as a field hospital, a great metaphor. He's always saying we're here to take care of each other. It reminds me of a wonderful story about a man who went to the doctor for some very serious tests. He was very ill, and the doctor submitted him to quite a battery of tests, and at one point asked to see the wife. And he said to the wife, he said, your husband is very, very ill. But if you take very good care of him, there's a chance he's going to survive. And she says, well, what do you mean, doctor? I said, well, I mean, if you fix his favorite meals for him, and you let him go fishing and to sports events with his buddies, don't ask him to take the garbage out or cut the lawn. Make sure the kids don't bother him too much. Let him have the remote control for the television set. Don't invite his mother-in-law over too frequently. He says, if you do all these things, a very good chance he's going to survive. Well, on the way home in the car, the husband was very nervous, needless to say, and he said, well, what did the doctor say? What did the doctor say? She said, honey, the doctor said you're going to die. But we really are here to take care of each other. And that's what community and that's what the church is about. And if we don't do that, the patient will die. And we see in today's society how the family and so many people are hurting. We really need to be that field hospital. The Catholic Church is a community of faith that the Lord established, giving us His Word and His sacraments. The Scriptures and the Acts of the Apostle chronicle the early experiences of the Church. In those writings, we see how an emerging community where people were united in the teaching of the apostles, in fellowship, in the breaking of the bread, in prayer. And no one was in want because everyone shared what they had with each other. People sold their properties, gave the proceeds to the apostles, who distributed to each one according to his or her needs. Discipleship is never a solo flight. It's always about being part of a community. That's why I kind of balk when people say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But if you're not part of a community of faith, what does that mean? We learn discipleship by the way we learn a language, by being part of a community that speaks that language. Recognition of the responsibilities of the community of faith is a continuing theme in Pope Francis's pontificate, which has energized the Church and the worldwide community with renewed optimism and confidence in our faith. There's been much news coverage during the past year about the Holy Father's effort to reform the central administration of the Church, and I'm privileged to be part of that College of Cardinals that advises him and helps him in this challenging task. Recognizing that this task would call for at least as much determination as diplomacy, particularly trying to straighten out the Vatican Bank and the finances of the Holy See, Pope Francis appointed Cardinal Pell from Australia to lead that effort. Cardinal Pell was a very competitive rugby player before entering the seminary and has the physical stature to attest to the activity. He is certainly being a strong man in helping the Holy Father to bring about these very needed reforms in the Curia. The participation of so many laymen and laywomen from many countries, from the United States, England, Malta, France, Germany, who have volunteered their services to modernize and help professionalize the business practices of the Vatican have been just a wonderful development. During my early years as a priest in Washington during the 70s, I spent a great deal of time ministering to immigrants from Central America. They worked day and night, washing dishes, very often eating the scraps of food from the dirty plates so as not to spend any money, so that they could send as much money as possible back to their relatives at home. Those workers could have had a more comfortable life by saving some money for themselves, but the needs of those back home caused them to send every penny that they could to their families. There was a time when our families from Ireland and Italy and Poland and other countries were doing the same thing. It's the logic of love and a family. People make incredible sacrifices without hesitation, and we're all the beneficiaries of that selflessness. Sometimes we're the givers, sometimes we're the receivers. In Boston, as throughout the world, the family is called to be aware of the needs of each other and to make sacrifices. The days of seemingly unlimited financial and human resources that we often took for granted are long gone. The Church, like all families, has to be more aware of the relationship between our resources, our immediate needs, and our hopes for the future. Our energy and passion should be to serve the needs of the poor and the downtrodden, and share the discipleship and holiness, and to be witnesses of Christ's presence in the world. When I began my tenure as Archbishop more than 10 years ago, we were in economic free fall. We had a $15 million annual operating deficit. We owed $35 million to the Knights of Columbus. The Catholic hospitals were losing about $40 million a year. The priest pension fund was failing. The lay pension fund was failing. And there were 1,000 lawsuits against the Archdiocese. Welcome to Boston. I had come from the West Indies, where my first diocese, my entire budget was $30,000 a year. But as I told the priests in Boston, but I didn't owe money to anybody. I used to think that a vow of poverty meant that you didn't own anything. That was before I owed $1 billion to people. Clearly, that was an extremely difficult and critical moment. Without careful attention to the problems, the future may have been even more bleak. But so many people stepped forward to help the Church. The Church's mission in the Archdiocese was certainly at stake. Today, our circumstances are much improved. The Archdiocese is moving forward on solid footing. This time, I'd like to acknowledge the wonderful work that Jim McDonough did as the Chancellor of the Archdiocese. He helped us face many difficult financial and organizational issues, always giving priority to the mission of the Church and the needs of the people we serve. Because of his efforts and the efforts of so many others, we're fulfilling that mission from our parishes and from the pastoral center just down the road here. Bishops and diocesan leaders from throughout the country, when they visit our pastoral center here in Braintree, are so impressed that we have such a beautiful and well-equipped building. We are indeed greatly blessed to be there and always grateful to the late Tom Flatley and the entire Flatley family for their extraordinary generosity in making it possible. The Bethany Chapel there in the pastoral center is the site of Mass each day at noon, and many visitors and local people come. And oftentimes, particularly during Lent, the Mass is standing room only, but you're always invited to join us. Among the most important priorities for the Church is promoting vocations to priesthood and lay ministry. In the Archdiocese, we're blessed with two very fine seminaries, St. John's Seminary in Brighton and Pope St. John Seminary, which is for second career vocations. When I arrived, we had 14 men studying for the priesthood, and people were urging me to close the seminary. I said, if we close the seminary, we'll never be able to open it again. And we've tried to impress on our priests and our people that vocations are everyone's business. Today, both seminaries are filled, and we have 65 at Pope John and 130 at St. John, 70 of whom are studying for the Archdiocese of Boston. So it's a great joy for us. The Archdiocese is also very much celebrating this year the year of consecrated life. In our history, our religious men and women have made such an extraordinary contribution to the life of the Archdiocese. Each community has their own different characters and charisms and characteristics. I've always liked the story about the Jesuit and the Franciscan who were walking down the street one day, and they were accosted by a young man who said, "Fathers, can you tell me what novena I should make to get a BMW?" The Franciscan said, "What's a BMW?" The Jesuit said, "What's a novena?" Pope Francis defies these categories and has melded the Jesuit and the Franciscan into one. We have a Pope who, with his wonderful Jesuit spirituality and intellect and training, has really embraced the spirituality of Francis, of being a universal brother, of protecting creation, of promoting peace, of reaching out to those on the periphery. Father Spadaro asked Pope Francis why he became a Jesuit, and he said, well, the three things about the Jesuits that attracted him were the missionary spirit, community, and discipline. We certainly see how Pope Francis exhibits these characteristics in spades. He's truly living his Jesuit vocation with an intense missionary zeal, love for community, and a disciplined life that doesn't waste anything, particularly not time. And I love the image of Pope Francis as we see him running around the Vatican, turning off the lights. It reminds me of my dad, you know. The Archdiocese of Boston joins with the church throughout the world in being fascinated with and intrigued by Pope Francis's authentic faith and spirituality. Unprecedented numbers of people now regularly gather to be with the Holy Father, from the overflowing crowds in St. Peter's Square each week to the more than 3 million youth who gathered in Brazil in the summer of 2013 for the celebration of World Youth Day, and to the more than 6 million who joined the celebration of Mass in the Philippines this last January. It's clear that the world has been inspired by this gentle but powerful witness to the presence of Jesus Christ here and now. May all of our hearts and spirits, whatever our faith or religious tradition, be lifted by his message of mercy, forgiveness, and love. God bless all of you. Thank you for your attention.
Please welcome our sponsoring co-partner, Jim McDonough.
So we've all been hearing, you know, this is a business crowd. So if you don't mind, I'm going to sort of jump to a couple of business topics. Is that okay?
Why not?
So we've been hearing about the many challenges surrounding the Vatican Bank for a lot of years, the finances at the Vatican. You mentioned Cardinal Pell. Have you seen progress in the last couple of years?
Certainly, in the last year, the Holy Father has completely reorganized and centralized the financial aspects of the Holy See, forming a special department just for finances, and Cardinal Pell heads that up. But there's a board of cardinals and experts who are from the financial world, some of the most outstanding people from all over Europe and the United States who have offered to make their services available, and it's a difficult transition, but it's taking place and it's very necessary. The Holy Father, of course, is very concerned that the resources of the Church be used principally for the mission of the Church, and so he's trying to create new efficiency and do away with waste and redundancy, and there are many things that in the past worked very well. The Vatican Radio, which was started by Marconi himself, for years was the only radio network that was heard everywhere in the world, and but it still depends very much on shortwave, which is becoming obsolete, and so those kinds of things need to be changed and evolve into modern communications, and this is what the Holy Father is working very hard to bring about.
I must admit, many of us were honored when you were selected to be one of the 9 members of the Pope's Council of Cardinals. It was not only a great honor for you, but for us as well. We're very proud of that role you play as one of Pope Francis' closest advisors. When someone asks me about, what is this College of Cardinals, I say, well, it's kind of like the board of directors of a company, right? So how much of your time at the College of Cardinals do you spend on the business side of the Church?
The Council of Cardinals is 8 cardinals who come from 8 different continents. So it's a very diverse group, and we try and bring to the Holy Father different points of view. But among the many things that are discussed. There has been a lot dealing with business issues. The Holy See, of course, is a country itself. It also runs the largest hospitals throughout Italy, and of course is supporting our missionary dioceses. There are almost as many missionary dioceses as there are regular dioceses in the church. So there is quite a financial component to the work of the Holy See, and so our meetings are often, we are blessed to have Cardinal Pell. As I say, when the Holy Father asked me who should head up the finances, I said a rugby player would be appropriate. But we also have the Archbishop of Munich, which is one of probably the largest dioceses as far as budget and organizations and agencies and schools and so forth. And so he is a very important source also. But the extraordinary lay people that have come forward, and one of the directors of the Vatican Bank is Professor Glendon from Harvard University, and she, of course, is an expert in international law, and that's very important because the Holy See is a separate state, so a lot of international legal questions arise, and she's very, very helpful. So she's over there every month, God bless her. Luckily, she has a daughter living in Rome, so she has a place to stay and sees her grandchildren, so there are some perks for her generous service.
From the audience, Cardinal, a rather sobering question about ISIS and the violence being done against Christians in the Middle East, if you wouldn't mind commenting what the Church is looking to do.
Yeah, all of us are shocked by just the image of those Coptic Christians being beheaded for no reason at all other than their faith. I mean, it just it's very, very disturbing that that part of the world is becoming increasingly more and more dangerous and difficult for Christians. We have many Chaldean Catholics who are here in the diocese, whose many of their relatives have been killed and had to leave behind absolutely everything, where that's one of the oldest communities of Christians going back to the first centuries of the Church, and being forced out of their country and subjected to slavery, pillage, rape. I just hope that our government and the governments of the other Western countries will do whatever possible to help protect those people and to change this atmosphere in which we live.
You knew Pope Francis long before he was Pope Francis, Cardinal Bergoglio. Could you ever, in your younger days, in your friendship, have envisioned him as a future Pope?
Well, in the conclave that elected Pope Benedict, actually his name was out there. I mean, and a lot of us had thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a Pope from South America, from the Americas, And when he wasn't elected, I guess many of us thought, well, he's going to be too old. However, Pope Benedict's retiring changed all of that radically. I mean, it gave the cardinals permission, as it were, to elect an older man, knowing that if he had health problems or became incapacitated, he could resign. It was something that wasn't on the radar screen before. So as I said, at the previous conclave, I was thinking that he could have been a wonderful choice, but when that didn't happen, I was happy that it happened now. He's certainly a very gifted man and a very holy leader, and has brought such a wonderful spirit to the Church.
Well, many of us in this room are actually pulling for a local candidate.
As I said, I had a round-trip ticket. No.
One last question, to really put you on the spot. So 2024 Olympics, it could come down to Boston and Rome. What do you think?
Well, either way, I'll get there.
Thank you, Cardinal Sean. I want to just say, you know, in every single circumstance, when I came to the Cardinal with difficult news, with something that was not going to be easy to deal with, his reaction was always the same. Get it out, tell the truth. The message has always got to be transparent, and it was consistent from the day I arrived till the day I left, and certainly the best boss I've ever had. Thank you.